This is an absolute beginner's guide to software engineering. In today's video, we're going to go over 3 of the most basic tools for a software engineer. The terminal, version controlling, we'll be using GitHub, and an IDE, in our case, VS Code. My goal is to demystify these tools for you so that we can break down the barrier to entry and really hit the ground running with some more complicated subjects like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in a later video. The intention of this series is for you to follow along on your own machine. In my own journey as a self-taught software engineer, I found it way more helpful when I'm actually completing the actions on my machine. You see, there's this gap in between where someone is telling you what to do and where what you're doing is somehow wrong. And that gap can be really frustrating, but that is where most of your growth is going to come from. If at any point you get really stuck, there's going to be a link in the description to our Discord. Please feel free to join us. We're all really happy to help there. That being said, let's dive into the terminal. The terminal can be a little bit intimidating to look at first, but it's really not that scary. For now, just think of it as a file explorer without the visual elements. You're going to be navigating your machine's file directory and altering folders and files. It's really that simple. You can also run commands in the terminal, which we'll get to later, but for now, just think of it as a glorified file explorer. For the majority of this series, I'm going to be using a MacBook. It's just what I'm more familiar with. The whole thing is totally doable on a Windows machine with a few caveats. Windows doesn't come pre-baked with Bash, which means you're going to have to download an extra client. Go ahead and pull up your Google or whatever search browser you're using and search for gitbash. The first link you get is the official Git website. Click download for Windows. This is going to download a simple exe installer. I'm not going to do it since I already have it installed, but it's a simple exe. In order to open gitbash, all you need to do is open up a file explorer window and choose where you want that instance of gitbash to be open. More on this later. I'm just going to right click on desktop and click gitbash here. Now we have a gitbash terminal open at the location where we chose. All of the commands that we're about to cover exist in this bash terminal, so feel free to follow along. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my MacBook now. Okay, Macos comes pre-built with Bash, so we don't have to install anything extra if we don't want to. If you'd like to just follow along in the default terminal, you're more than welcome to. Open up Spotlight and type terminal. This is your default terminal. I personally prefer a few quality of life upgrades in the terminal, so I'm going to be showing you how to install iTerm2 and Oh My Zsh, and later on I'll also show you how to customize your personal prompt. However, if you'd like to skip these sections, I'll be sure to leave timestamps in the description. Installing iTerm2 is easy. Just open up your search engine, search for iTerm2, first link and the giant. Now if you open up your Spotlight and type iTerm, here's iTerm2. I know it looks very similar to the default terminal right now. We're about to change that. Let's go back to our search browser and search for Oh My Zsh. Perfect. This first link, ohmyz.sh, click on install Oh My Zsh, and it'll take you down to this command here. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said that the terminal can also run commands in it, which is what makes it not just a glorified file explorer. You don't need to know any details about this command right now. This is a pretty complicated command, so all you need to do is copy it, paste it into your terminal, and run it. Perfect. That's finished. Press enter. You'll see your new prompt. And now we need to restart iTerm so that Oh My Zsh can actually give us these nice out-of-the-box features. Something important that I want to mention about running commands like this: only do this from trusted websites. Nefarious actors can do bad things to your machine if you just run random commands that you find on the internet. So be careful. Okay, now that we've restarted iTerm, I'm personally getting all of these notifications at the top. I'm going to ignore them for now. I might go back and try to fix this later, but right now this is not important. I'm going to type clear to get rid of that. So clear just obviously clears your terminal. And now we can actually talk about our prompt. The default prompt for Oh My Zsh is pretty minimal. It's actually a little bit too minimal for my taste, and I'll be showing you how to change this in a couple of minutes, but let's talk about what we're looking at here. This tilde is shorthand for your home directory. By the way, the tilde key is just above the tab key and below the escape key. Your home directory is defined in your terminal settings and is typically just /users/ whatever your username is. We can see what this actually is by typing pwd, which stands for print working directory. Print working directory will give you the full path of whatever directory you're currently in. So now we can see that this tilde is shorthand for /users/facehair4000. Now that we're in our home directory, it might be nice to see the contents. So if we'd like to see the contents of whatever directory we're in, we can just type ls, which stands for list. This will list out the contents of our current directory. Press enter. Perfect. So these are the contents of our current directory. If we'd like to enter any one of these subdirectories, we can type cd, which stands for change directory, and then the name of the directory that we'd like to enter. Now remember how we installed Oh My Zsh and restarted iTerm? This is so that we can have nice things like tab completion. So I'll just type desk and hit tab, hit enter. Perfect. So now we see that our tilde has changed to desktop. So we know that this is just indicative of wherever we are. If we type pwd here, we'll see that our full directory path is users/facehair4000/desktop. Now let's go back to our home directory. We can do this by either changing directory to tilde, changing directory to /users/facehair4000, or changing our directory to .. I know this can be a little bit confusing, but let me break it down. .. is what we refer to as a relative path. So the dot is a relative shorthand that stands for whatever your current working directory is. And when we add a .. to that, it's telling us to go up one level in the file tree. So from desktop, if we look at our file tree here, from desktop, one .. will take us back to facehair4000, or our home directory. And if we type another .. it'll take us back to users. Does this make sense? We just want to go back to our home directory, however, so we'll type a single .. to go back one. Perfect. And now we can see that desktop has changed back to tilde. The next command that we're going to talk about is mkdir, or make directory. Make directory does exactly what it sounds like it does. It's going to make a folder wherever you tell it to. So the folder that we're going to create is the source folder, or src. This is a common path that you'll see for most software engineers on their home directory. So from our home directory, we'll type mkdir space src. And if we'd like to confirm that it worked, we can type ls. And now we can compare the previous list of contents to the new list of contents, and we see that we have this src folder. Let's cd into src. We can type ls to see that it's empty, and we'll use mkdir again to make a project folder. So to explain, every project that we do within this video series will have its individual folder, and each one of those folders is going to live in the src directory. So for this video, let's make one called facehair part 1. And if we type ls, we can see our facehair part 1 folder here. Now let's cd into facehair part 1. And we'll talk about our next command, which is the touch command. The touch command was originally intended just to update the timestamp of a file. Basically, think of it as essentially refreshing when a file was last updated. However, if you touch a file that doesn't exist, it creates that file. So this has become the functional purpose of the touch command. Let's touch a file called testfile.txt. You'll notice that I'm using something called camel case here. Camel case is where the first word in a file or folder is lowercase and every subsequent word is capitalized. So facehair part 1, for example, facehair is all lowercase, and then there's a capital P for part and the number 1. We're going to do the same thing for test file, and we always want to add an extension name when we're touching a new file. So .txt is just going to initialize an empty text file. Go ahead and press enter. ls, and you'll see testfile.txt. Now this is another nice quality of life feature that Oh My Zsh provides us. All of our directories are highlighted blue, or whatever color we tell it to if we want to alter our theme, and all of our files are not, so we can easily differentiate between a directory and a file. Now let's briefly talk about some of the in-terminal text editors that we have. We'll talk about Nano first, since it's pretty easy and self-explanatory. Nano is a built-in application that can edit text files. So if we type nano space test file.txt, again, tab completion is very nice, and hit enter, we'll be shown a blank page just like this. In this page, you can type anything you want. You'll notice all of the options at the bottom for different commands you can use inside of Nano. I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't use Nano very often. I use this every now and then for editing commit messages or config files, but it's not a common thing that I'm in Nano. It's just important to know how to use it and how to get out of it, most importantly. So in order to exit Nano, we want to press Control X. It's going to ask us if we would like to save our changes. We can hit Y or N for yes or no. And then it's going to ask us what name we would like to save these changes in. So we can just press enter to overwrite testfile.txt. Now let's briefly talk about Vim. Vim is a little bit less self-explanatory than Nano. And a lot of the time, people find themselves in Vim without knowing what the hell is going on, and then they don't know how to get out of it. So we really just want to cover the basics of Vim here. Chances are you're not going to be using this unless by accident. So let's vim test file.txt, and you'll see that we're brought to another text editor with the file that we just edited. In order to edit a file in Vim, you want to press I for insert, and you can use your arrow keys to navigate, and then you can add whatever. In order to exit insert mode, you press the escape key, and in order to exit Vim, you type colon and then WQ for write quit, or QA for quit and abandon. So we want to write quit and press enter. Another command that I use pretty often is the open command. This command is only available on Macos and is not available on Windows. So sorry, Windows users, give me just a minute to explain this one. If we type open space period, do you remember when we talked about period a couple of minutes ago? The period represents your current directory. So if we type open space period, we'll open a Finder window at the location where we typed the command. So facehair part 1 is the folder that we're in, and we can see our testfile.txt right here, typos and all. Now we're going to talk about how to delete files and directories using the terminal. So let's create a directory that we don't really care about. Let's mkdir delete me ls, and we can see that we have our delete me directory as well as our testfile.txt. Now let's touch a file, and we're going to touch delete me / unused.txt. This use of the touch command is actually going to create a file called unused.txt inside of our delete me directory that we just created. This is just to show you that you can run any of these commands from multiple directories away if you prefer. So now we can ls, and we see that we still just have the delete me directory and the testfile.txt. If we ls delete me, we can see the contents of delete me is unused.txt. If you'd like, feel free to change directory to delete me, or however you want to be playing with these commands. Please explore for sure. This is for you to be hands-on. Now let's delete unused.txt. So in order to delete something from the terminal, we're actually going to use the command rm, which stands for remove. So let's remove delete me / unused.txt. Press enter, and now if we ls delete me, we can see that there's no contents within delete me. Now let's remove delete me. That didn't work. What our terminal is telling us is that delete me is a directory, and we apparently can't remove directories. Well, we can remove directories, we just need to use an optional flag. So let's rm space dash rf. This stands for recursive and force. Recursive just means that if the directory has contents, it will delete all of the contents of the directory, including any nested contents. So if the directory contains directories that contain contents, all of that content is deleted. I want to stress here, this command is irreversible. So please be sure that you want to actually run this command before you do it on anything in production. So let's rm-rf delete me, and we can ls, and the only thing left within our directory is test file. If at any point you're curious about the inner workings of any of these commands or any other command, you can type man, which stands for manual, and then the command name. So let's man rm, and now we can see all of the options that go along with the rm command. So you can see here rm-rf is for recursively removing all files contained within the foobar directory hierarchy. The documentation isn't super pretty, but if you're curious, feel free to check out any of them. In order to exit, just press Q on the keyboard. Now we're going to update our terminal theme with something that I personally prefer. Again, this section is completely optional. I'll leave timestamps in the description. Feel free to skip it, but from here on out, you're going to see my terminal look different than this. All of our terminal settings live within a file called .zsh. Any file or directory that's preceded with a dot is hidden by default. This file lives in our home directory, so if we type ls tilde, which you'll remember is shorthand for our home directory, we can see exactly what we saw before, which are all of these subdirectories, including our source directory. But there's no .zshrc. In order to see the hidden files, we need an optional flag on ls. So let's type ls-a, which stands for all, and tilde. And now we can see a lot of stuff. What we're really looking for here is the ZSHRC. Let's use nano to see what the contents of ZSHRC are. Type nano tilde slash .zshrc. These are our terminal settings. There's a lot to look at in here. Don't get overwhelmed. What we really want to see is this ZSH theme, which is set to Robbie Russell. You can look at the Oh My ZSH docs for all of the different themes that are present. I have one that I personally altered and made to my liking. It's not the prettiest thing in the world code-wise, but I actually really like the way that it looks in the terminal. If you'd like to use this theme as well, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to put a link in the description. So let's hit Control X to exit out of the settings here. What I'm going to do is just edit the Robbie Russell theme to contain the theme that I've personalized. All of the themes live within the Oh My ZSH directory here. We can tell that that's a directory because of the blue color. First of all, let's change directory back to our home directory. It's just easier from here. Oh, by the way, what just happened there? Okay, let me show you something. I CD'd and then didn't type the tilde correctly and ended up in this weird section here. In order to get out of any of this, in order to quit any command that you run, just hit Control C and it will just cancel what you just did. So let's CD back to our home directory. And now let's nano .oh my Zsh. We'll use tab completion. And one of the other really nice things about Oh My Zsh is that I don't need to know the contents of any folder. I can just hit tab and it will tell me what all of the options are. So we're looking for, let's see, themes. Perfect. And what is inside of themes? Do you wish to see all 142 lines? I'm going to hit Y. And now we can see here, where's Robbie Russell? Here he is. RobbieRussell.zsh-theme. Perfect. So these are the contents of the Robbie Russell theme. Let's delete everything in this file. The quickest way to do it is to cut the text using Control K. So we'll just hold Control K at the top. There we go, file's gone. Now I'm going to go to my personal Git gist, which contains my ZSH theme that I've customized. Copy it and paste it into the file. And then hit Control X to exit, Y to save changes, and Enter to overwrite the file. Now we need to reload our terminal. And this is my personal ZSH theme. You'll see on the right, we have a little timer that tells us how long the previous command took to run. And on the left is your tilde, or current working directory. So let's CD around and just see how it differs. If we CD into src, now we can see we're at tilde/src instead of just src like the previous theme. And if we CD again into facehair, we can see that we're at tilde src facehair part 1. I like to be able to see the full path of where I am. Great. Now that we've made our terminal a little bit prettier and have talked about some of the common commands in there, I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable navigating around. I think it's time to talk about version control. Version control is magical. It saved my ass more times than I can possibly count. Basically what version control does is take a snapshot of your project whenever you tell it to. So let's say you have a project and it's in a perfectly good working state. You want to save that snapshot before you make any possibly breaking changes. You tell your version control software to take a snapshot of exactly that moment of your project, and then you begin to make your changes. Let's hypothetically say you make these changes and everything breaks. You don't have to worry about fixing any of those mistakes. You can just wipe it back to the snapshot that you took before and have a perfectly working project again. It's important to note that Git and GitHub are not the same thing. Git is just a version control software that exists on your machine. GitHub is what we call a repository. It's essentially a filing cabinet where each drawer contains an individual snapshot of your project that you've uploaded. There are many alternative Git repositories, not just GitHub. Two of the most popular would be GitLens and Bitbucket. However, GitHub is the one that's predominantly used, so that's the one we're going to be covering in this tutorial. The first thing we'll want to do is head over to github.com and create an account if you haven't already. This is your dashboard. The first thing we're going to want to do is head to the settings. So click the icon in the upper right and head down to settings. And we need to set up SSH and GPG keys. This process is really well documented here in generating SSH keys, so feel free to walk through this on your own, but I'm happy to walk you through some of the basics as well. So let's open up this link regardless and head to generating a new SSH key and adding it to the SSH agent. All of this information is pretty interesting if you want to read through it, but if you want to skip to the good stuff, let's scroll down to the step-by-step instructions, and we'll start by pasting this command into our terminal. Be sure that when you do this, you replace the email with whatever email it is that you used to set up your GitHub account. It's going to ask you which file you would like to save the key in. Just press enter to use the default file, and enter a passphrase. This can be any password that you'll remember. Also note, this is the first time you'll likely be entering a password into the terminal. It's a little strange because it doesn't look like you're actually typing anything, but you are. So just type the password and press enter. Perfect. Now we have an SSH key saved at this file location. Let's head back to our docs. Scroll down to adding your SSH key to the SSH agent and copy this command, just the top line. Paste it into your terminal and hit enter. What we just did was start the SSH agent process in the background and received confirmation that the process has been started in the background as process ID 21204 or whatever it is in your case. It's not important, you don't have to remember that. Now, the GitHub documents are telling us that we need to check to make sure that the file ssh/config exists on macOS. So let's go ahead and try that. We're just going to copy and paste this open command. All right, the GitHub documents called it. We do not have that file, so we need to touch the file. We talked about this command earlier as well. So we can touch this file. We'll copy the command here, paste it into the terminal, and now we can run that open command again to open the file. Obviously, the file is going to be empty since we just created it, but GitHub tells us exactly what we need to place in there. So we'll copy the contents and paste it into this window. Earlier, when you were asked to input a password, If you pressed enter without inputting a password, you want to delete this keychain line. But if you did input a password, then just leave everything as is. I'm going to be leaving it as is. Be sure to save and exit. Now we can add that SSH key to the SSH agent by copying this line and pasting it into our terminal. Enter your passphrase. Perfect. Confirmation, identity added, and all of this fun text. Great. Now we'll follow the docs over to adding a new SSH key to your GitHub account. This process is pretty easy. Scroll down to where it says copy the SSH public key to your clipboard, and we'll use this command, pbcopy. We just want the first line here. So copy that, paste it into your terminal, and let's talk about it for just a quick second. pbcopy is a command that copies some text into your computer's clipboard. This caret is telling us to copy all of the contents of this file into our clipboard. So we'll just go ahead and press enter. And the contents of our file should be copied into our clipboard now. Head back over to GitHub. In your settings, SSH and GPG keys, hit new SSH key. We're going to add a name for it. I'm going to call this personal MacBook. Just keep this as authentication key and paste the contents of your SSH key. Click add SSH key and success. Now we need to configure our username. So head back over to your terminal and type git space config space -- global space user dot name and whatever your username is. All right, great. Now that we have our GitHub account set up and configured locally with SSH, we can actually start tinkering around with some files. This is where I had intended to start talking about the IDE, but we're actually coming up on about 30 minutes here, and I had intended to keep these videos relatively snack-sized. So I think we're going to go ahead and cut it, but in the next video, we're going to set up and learn the basics of VS Code, learn some basic Git commands, and if we have some time, we'll start our very first HTML project. And seriously, thank you guys so much for hanging around until the end. This is the first bit of talking head content I've ever just filmed and edited in front of a camera. Honestly, it's much more uncomfortable than I had expected, and I'm still getting used to the whole thing. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, comments, things I could do better, things you liked, literally any input is amazing. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Your feedback and constructive criticism are seriously invaluable. And until next time, keep learning.